Hello, everybody, and welcome to the LeanTossup College Football Podcast. It is week 7 here of our podcast. We're nearing the end of the season here. We only got about 6 more weeks to go in the regular season. But then obviously we're going to have the conference championships and the bowls. So we still got a lot of football left to go. And yeah, so far it's been a pretty good season for us in terms of winnings. I'm joined, of course, as always, by my co-host at BuckMetrics. Yeah, pretty good season so far, I think, for us, right?
Yeah, good season and all that. Yeah, happy to co-host the sharpest college football podcast. Blah blah blah. Let's just get right to it. We owe everybody a huge apology. Um, in the Big Ten preseason pod, we made a huge deal about Nebraska playing at Rutgers, which happened last Friday, and we didn't even mention it in last week's pod. So
That is true. Yes,
I
we
get some feedback from Twitter like, "Hey, I like your podcast," and I'd like to apologize to everybody that's kind enough to send me that feedback to say I let you down last week.
yes, we did forget to talk about the game. That being said, the game did not disappoint
Oh
though.
no, it
That
was it
was
was all we expected except for who was coaching Nebraska basically.
yeah, that's the only thing we didn't expect. Yeah, 14-13. Not
We
a
kind of
cla-
thought that that's where his tenure would end. Like he'll find a way to lose that one, and that's got to be it.
Yeah, but no, the loss to Georgia Southern did him in first for Scott Frost. But yeah, no, the thing of it is though, like on one hand, that would have been the crazy season if like he goes to Rutgers and then they lose in New Jersey on a Friday night and then he gets fired. But I think the even more Nebraska thing is that they somehow beat Rutgers by a point on a Friday night in New Jersey, and then somehow they are now co-tied for lead in the Big Ten West. That is somehow I think more Nebraska than that first thing. I like if you had asked me, we're like, hey, do you think Nebraska could be tied for first place in the Big Ten West? I'm like, no, that's crazy. But again, this is the crazy thing about college football is their one conference loss is to Northwestern, which is kind of
Yeah.
unforgivable, but it's still in the conference standings that's still one loss. And then they lost to Georgia Southern, which is bad, but that's not a Big Ten team. So that's actually pretty good. It doesn't matter who you lose to unless they're in their conference. So somehow Nebraska, and this is crazy, they are in the hunt to win the Big Ten West, which is insane that you could fire your coach and then also be still in the hunt for the division. That's crazy. It's crazy. I think the craziest thing to me is the fact that somehow they are competitive in this just mess of a Big Ten West.
No, and it's the maybe the most Big Ten West thing is that Nebraska has a win over a first place team, or Northwestern does.
Yeah,
Um, that kind of says it all.
yeah. I mean, the this
Northwestern.
yeah,
Yeah.
Northwestern is. I mean, Northwestern again. Shout out to them. So they, I mean, definitely contributed to. They contributed to basically Scott Frost's firing. That you could definitely like if they don't lose in Ireland, Scott Frost probably still has a job. But then also in their first game, then they basically then Wisconsin. After firing their head coach, in Wisconsin's first game, they absolutely get the tar beaten out of them by this Wisconsin team. And Grant Mertz throws for 5 passing touchdowns, no interceptions. Where was this Graham Mertz for like
Yeah.
four? Like I've never seen this kind of like again. I had him over 1.5 passing touchdowns against Ohio. You couldn't score one more passing touchdown against. You're like, nah, we'll save them all for the Northwestern game.
Yeah.
Like,
You know what it is? Northwestern is basically a batting practice pitcher,
yeah,
and they basically they struck out Scott Frost in batting practice somehow.
yeah.
I don't know. That's that's what happened in Ireland.
I mean, it's so crazy that like somehow, and I don't know why specifically. Like, I'm not sure if we're talking about this game later or not. But like now, Wisconsin plays Michigan State. I have like somehow Wisconsin is like laying I think like 6.5 or 7. But
Hmm.
like my model's like no, Michigan State's a better team. But like I don't want to touch this game. It's 7.5
No,
points now. Like I'm not touching this. I'm like there's no way. Like
no. Michigan State's kind of almost an honorary Big Ten West team at this point.
basically yeah, they're 0-3 in conference. But yeah, so the standings in the Big Ten West: first place Illinois,
And
also tied for first place Purdue,
yes,
also tied for first place Nebraska. Also
yeah,
somehow Illinois is 24th ranked. Then in sole position of second place, I guess, or well, technically fourth place, I guess, but second place. 1-1 Wisconsin, Minnesota Golden Gophers. Then in, I guess, fifth, a three-way tie for fifth place, you've got Wisconsin at 1-2, Iowa at 1-2, and Northwestern at 1-2. Wait, who did Iowa beat? Iowa beat. Oh, Rutgers. They beat
Rutgers.
Rutgers.
Yeah, the classic. How could we forget that?
That's right. The classic. Well, they just destroyed Rutgers. They're like, okay, this is they used all their points on Rutgers. They couldn't get any more against Iowa. Like, it's just an absolute mess. Like, and again, this is all just for the opportunity to get obliterated by Ohio State in the conference
Yep.
championship game. So
Yep.
it's crazy,
Exactly.
crazy. It's like, yeah, okay. Which team wants to have Ohio put 40 on them in the conference championship game? So, anyways, all right. Let us kick off the dashboard. So let's start recapping last week. More than what we've just done so far. What just happened? What does it mean? A lot to talk about here.
Yeah, somehow there is a universe outside the Big Ten West. Looking back on what we talked about last week and how that played out, um, in my BBMI segment, boy, I just really stunk up a couple of notice or things I noticed. I said Duke giving 3.5 at Georgia Tech and Air Force giving 9.5. Both showed that the market didn't know what they had in these teams, and guess what? I didn't know what I had in these teams. They both lost outright and looked just like garbage in the process. And bum list number one quarterback Logan Bonner of Utah State did not play in that win. I don't know if he was injured or not. It's not the easiest thing to find Utah State quarterback news. But I'm thinking that probably played a role in why Utah State might have turned it around here.
Yeah, Adam Schefter definitely doesn't report on Utah State quarterbacks. But no, I mean, this is the thing. I mean, I guess it's like a soft benching, I guess. But
Yeah.
the thing is, like the big one, the big surprise there for me has to be Georgia Tech. What has happened with this Georgia? So this Georgia Tech team goes from probably one of the worst teams in college football to firing their head coach to then immediately beating a top 25 team in Pitt, so a team some people thought had an outside chance of competing for the conference. We did not think that. Other people did. Those people are idiots and that rightfully deserved a loss to Georgia Tech. But then they somehow beat Duke, a team that we're actually pretty high on. And like
Mm-hmm.
I think people are like, oh, of course they beat Duke. Duke sucks. I'm like, well, guess what, guys? I'm getting like 7 points with Duke this week now against North Carolina, a team that's just horrendous offense. So I'm taking that. But like, what is this Georgia team though? Like, like Georgia, was this Georgia Tech team? Like, they just come. Like, was this like, did was Jeff Collins that bad? Like, was it literally just like everybody hates him and he's gone? I'm like, oh, cool, let's play some football now. Like, I've never seen this kind of stunning turnaround. Like Nebraska, okay, fine. You can make an argument that like the team was still talented. You have Casey Thompson in that, and well, Arizona State they were like a little frisky, so that's kind of fine. And there's some sort of weird thing where apparently some assistants were like leaking strategy to other teams to beat them to like that was crazy, but that stopped now. But like I this crazy turnaround for Georgia Tech is just is insane. I like and I think they were like 20 some odd point dogs to Pitt too. Like it's crazy the turnaround we've seen from this team in just 2 games.
Yeah. It's something to think about is just like because we're going to see that the trend is usually when national guys talk about trends, it's just because they're lazy and just have nothing better to do than just comment on something that's right in front of their face. But I think there's going to be more and more of these early season firings, um, which we have to really kind of figure out and get some data points together and see, is there any signal in the noise here, or is it always going to be noise that just you really can't discern from year to year? I never heard of Brett Key, and I know a lot about college football. Never heard of the guy. And now he's 2-0. Um, so yeah,
Unstoppable Brett Key.
yeah. I knew Mickey Joseph. I knew he came from LSU. I didn't know he was even going to be the interim. I mean, we both thought that it was just a matter of time before Mark Whipple was going to be interim. So I don't know. It's going to be interesting. And it kind of just looking just a note for way down the road, when you're looking at season totals, it might not be a great idea to play an under if you've got a coach that's really on the hot seat. Kind of the analog to Charlie Brewer getting hurt just killed my under bet on Liberty because they got a real quarterback in his place. And I think that you might see that if you've got somebody who's just, it's a matter of time before he gets fired. And actually, I've got a little commentary on that later. Maybe don't take that under because they might actually get an assistant that stumbles in there and knows how to do things and kind of ruin your under bet.
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing, right? Like, it's crazy that like we sit here and we're like, this Georgia Tech team is horrible. They have no idea what they're doing, and apparently there is talent on this team, talent enough to beat Pitt, a team that beat West Virginia, right? Like, so it's crazy that we're seeing this, and that's a really good point too about like. I mean, obviously, we'll do this next year again, obviously for college football. But like, we might get to a point where like we're looking at some of these and we're like, no, 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 like this guy's getting fired, so we're not gonna bet his season win total under because we're scared of that and like some good guy coming in. But like for some of these, like I was kind of under the impression that like Georgia Tech had no talent, and like I mean the other one of course is Carl Durrell there in Colorado. Like I don't even think they have any talent on that team. And like
Yeah.
they're what 20 some odd dogs. They're at least 20 dogs. There's no way they're less than a 20 some odd point dog this week. But like, or I'm not sure if they play next this week or next week. But like, that was gonna be a fascinating one. Like that's the test case, right? Because we've seen, I think, of all the teams we've seen fired so far, we've seen Wisconsin, Georgia Tech, Arizona State, and Nebraska. We've seen all their head
Yeah.
coaches fired.
Yep.
Colorado has now been fired, no second game since then, but we've all seen at least some not turnaround. Nebraska took a game because they had to get pounded by Oklahoma in their last win of the season, apparently. So, but then yeah, so I'm excited to see well, excited is maybe the wrong word. Uh, Enthralled to see what Colorado can do when they take the field next. So, yeah, that's
Uh, Morbidly curious. Would
more.
that be maybe a
That's
good?
the right word. Morbidly curious. Like either lose by 40 or win by 3. One or the other.
Yeah.
What's next?
Okay. I mentioned that UMass gave Eastern Michigan more of a game than actually Arizona State did at Eastern Michigan. I posed the question whether this makes UMass more bettable in any game going forward, and they actually easily covered their 26-point spread versus Liberty. That we might talk about that later again about UMass later. My QB plus or my QB top QB lists I had as number one Max Duggan for TCU, and he threw for 9.8 yards per attempt in a very important cover at Kansas.
I It depends when you bet that. I think it was either a push. Actually, it really does depend when you bet that. I think on any one, it could have either been a push, a cover, or a loss. I'd seen that at 7.5, 7, and 6.5. So it depends when
Okay,
you got it. But did you bet that at 6.5 or not?
I didn't play that. I
No,
did not play that one.
I didn't play it either because I had TCU 9.5, so I didn't play it. Yeah, but yeah, no, like TCU, man, this is actually a really good team this year. Like it's crazy that I guess just getting rid of their head coach last year has really turned this team around, and they're really exciting, fun team. They got a really good game this weekend against Oklahoma State. Excited about that one. We're gonna talk about that game later.
Yeah. The bum list had it did not disappoint. We'll put it that way. Spencer Rattler played his way off the bum list. He threw for 9.3 per attempt at Kentucky. Now Kentucky was out without Will Levis, but that's a good showing. 9.3 per attempt is up there. Then some other names that really played to their naming on the bum list. Ryan Helinski for Northwestern, 22 attempts for 147 yards when they got blown up by Wisconsin. My favorite guy to talk about every week, Kyle Van Treese of Georgia Southern, threw 4 picks in a loss to Georgia State, keeping my dim hopes alive for the at least a push on Georgia Southern on four wins. I had the under. Um, Number 10 on the bum list was this guy. I've not seen him yet play, John Paddock for Ball State. Probably good that I haven't seen him play. He threw for only 4.5 yards per attempt in a win at Central Michigan. Jim McElwain, what are you doing to your CHIPS program, man? Didn't they didn't they beat Washington State in a bowl game last year?
Yeah, they did.
Yeah,
Hmm.
man. Don't think that's going to happen this year.
No.
Um, and then number 2 on the bum list, Connor Bazelak of Indiana. He threw for 4.1 per attempt. Man, this guy is just a rough watch. He is just brutal. And I was kind of joking, although maybe it's not too unfair when I said, I think it was week 2, I said that Tommy DeVito versus Connor Bazelak might be the worst Power 5 matchup of quarterbacks. And I think that's maybe I should have said outside a Guinea game involving Iowa. Um,
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. So that's basically wrapping up some of the things that we observed and talked about last week. Some of the games, what did we see that's informing our narrative? Alabama beats Texas A&M 24-20. I go away from this game thinking, if I tell you that the best quarterback in an SEC game is 12 of 19 for 111 yards and one touchdown, is your first reaction going to be, yeah, Jimbo is definitely involved in this game somehow?
Yeah, I mean, this is crazy. This is like we are we are kind of witnessing the birth of like a really good rivalry here. Like this is now two straight years when this has been a very close game between these two SEC West teams. Again, I've talked in the past about at some point Nick Saban will not be the head coach of Alabama. I was not saying retirement statement, but like at some point he will not. He physically cannot continue indefinitely to be the head coach. Like at some point he will not be on this earth. Again, he's probably the best head coach of all time, but at some point he will not be the head coach of Alabama. We'll have to see what happens at that point, right? Like if like we're again, Texas A&M has not been in the SEC particularly long, only about a decade, which is not a long amount of time. The SEC is starting to become a much deeper conference, basically one of the two like basically super conferences. This is starting to become a very, very interesting rivalry. This is seemingly one of the only teams that's actually able to take Alabama to the wire. No idea how when they like lose
Yeah.
to App State. Again, that's crazy, but like this is becoming a very interesting rivalry between A&M and Alabama, and it's good to have some competitors in the SEC West. Now, again, also because A&M's like A&M, I think has been basically functionally eliminated from the SEC title race, but mostly because it's lost. But I think they lost to Mississippi State. So,
Hmm.
but like it's good to see some competition in this SEC West and some teams that can actually take on Alabama. And yeah, I'm excited to see this rivalry kind of every year now. This is becoming kind of must watch TV here for the SEC West, and that's again usually the SEC West. All the Alabama games like Alabama crushing other team. Now it's kind of like yeah, okay, here's a team that's taking the fight to them, and I think because of the comments we saw in the offseason where basically Nick Saban said you guys are buying your players, and Jimbo Fisher said I'm not saying anything. I'm not. Jimbo Fisher said no comment. Basically, this is a heated rivalry, and I think it's really cool to actually see a genuine rivalry where, like, not outside of state boundaries. Obviously, you see Auburn and Alabama hate each other, and Texas A&M. It's kind of interesting. It's really nice to see a cross-state rivalry where people like genuinely hate each other. It's kind of cool.
Yeah. No, you looked out the good parts about somebody should have slapped him and he's a
That's
narcissist. Yeah.
yes,
But yeah, can't cover the entire story in a podcast. Next game, Oklahoma State beats Texas Tech 41-31. Do we have to believe in Oklahoma State at this point?
no.
Wow. Okay. You want to reconsider that?
No, I've
Okay.
already placed a bet against them this week. I've already got TCU this week. I got again FanDuel. Shout out to FanDuel giving amazing, well, not amazing for me lines early in the week. Like I'm able to bet some insane lines on Sunday that just get instant closing line value. I've got TCU minus 1.5 on this already. This is up to minus 3.5. So I'm able to cash in there on FanDuel early
Nice.
on Sunday. But no, I like this Oklahoma State team probably should have lost. They were trailing for a large part of this game. They pulled it out. They shouldn't have covered. I actually did bet Texas Tech 9.5. Very sad that did not get the cover.
That
Um,
sucks.
but I mean, it's okay though, because now I get to bet against them this week. But no, I this Oklahoma State team is long since due. Um, Early on in the podcast, we had a good joke where I said that in one of the highlight packages says no one talks about Oklahoma State. Well, there's reasons why. I mean,
Hmm.
these are not like amazing wins. We're like, oh my god, Oklahoma State looked amazing when they trailed for most of the game against an unranked Texas Tech team. Great, good win there. Like, no, Oklahoma State's time is coming. They are not going to cruise an undefeated season. They're trying to come to the hard part of their schedule now. TCU, Texas, like Kansas, I'm sure is probably somewhere in there. There's gonna be some losses coming up for Oklahoma State, and it's good to see that finally we're gonna. I think this is probably one of the most fraudulent teams in college football. next to like Clemson. I think this one and Clemson are like the ones that I've circled. It's like okay, there's going to be a regression game here where they actually play the level they're actually playing at, and that I think hopefully that might be this week.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that later. The BuckMetrics model actually has Oklahoma State as the worst team in the Big 12. So the answer is no. The generous answer is no, not yet,
Wow, so
and
you
likely
asked
not.
a trick question there. You're like, oh, do you believe them? I'm like, no, and you're like, yeah, I also don't believe them
Yeah,
either.
it's just relationships have these little testing questions, and you
Yes.
passed that one. Okay. Next one. Notre Dame beats BYU 28-20. Drew Pine went 22 of 28 for 262 yards. Do we have to believe in him now?
Yeah, so this is one I'll actually think about because my model has and still does hate Notre Dame. It absolutely hates them. Every week it says they should lose by a lot of points, and then they somehow win these games. They absolutely obliterated North Carolina. Still have no idea how that happened. And then they beat BYU. Now, to be fair, and I did not realize this or kind of downplay the importance of this, maybe betting on the Mormons visiting Las Vegas, maybe not the best bet. So maybe that one is on us. But we'll have to see. I'm still not on board with this Notre Dame team, but like they're starting to become somewhat more impressive. I'm becoming somewhat more impressed with this Notre Dame team, but my model still hates them though. So we'll have to see.
Very fair. That you just reminded me of something, just a total non sequitur, a great story that I have to share. Um, Utah had a defensive lineman named Bradley Anai. I think he's with the Steelers now. He's a defensive lineman, and preseason, I think it was at media day, he was asked about Utah playing at BYU, and he had one of my all-time favorite quotes. He said, "There's nothing worse than playing in front of 60,000 sober white people." So shout out Bradley Anai. You're my guy. I love you. I follow him on Twitter. I think he followed me back too. So the Vegas joke just shook that one loose. Um, next,
Yeah.
Arizona State beats Washington 45-38. I look at this on the heels of a feisty win against USC, despite what you would characterize as the line of disrespect when they played the USC. I have to wonder, had the Sun Devils just quit on Herm? And I'd forgotten about that story about the coaches leaking stuff. Had everybody just said enough of you, Herm? And maybe there's some pieces that are still there?
I guess. I mean, Emory Jones wasn't like horrible at Florida last year. I had him over 1.5 passing touchdowns, and unfortunately got like knocked out with a concussion early in the
Yeah.
game, so like that didn't cash. But no, I was all over Arizona State in this game. I had them. I got like a ridiculous, like 14.5 or something, and
Yeah.
the money line. Like I cleaned up on this game. This was a great game, and we saw this coming a mile away.
Yep.
And
This is both our models had this one.
yeah, we both had this, and this was great to see this happen in real time. But no, like I think it's a combination of both. I think this Arizona State team is not bad, but like there is more points are being scored. This team definitely has looked better in its 2 games without Herm. Like this team was competitive with USC. That's actually somewhat difficult to do when they're scoring a billion points. The fact that you keep scoring and but this Washington team, like and again, this is one of the reasons why I'm so hesitant to touch the Michigan State plus 7.5 against Wisconsin because like we saw this Washington team maul that Michigan State team, and they've looked
Mm-hmm.
horrible the last 2 weeks. They've been what were they against USC? It was like no UCLA. Were they
UCLA.
7? It was more than a score, I
But it
think.
was it was 8, but that was after a late touchdown and 2-point conversion with like a minute left.
No,
It
no. What
wasn't
no?
it
What
wasn't
was
that
the
close.
line in that game? I'm trying to remember.
Oh, I think it was 4-ish. It was less than a touchdown,
Was it less than a
but they were
touchdown? Yeah,
favored.
but so like
Yeah.
they've now lost. They lost outright to UCLA pretty badly, and then they
Yeah.
also like I mean again this they were you Arizona State actually had a much bigger lead. Washington State came back a bit.
Yeah.
Arizona kind of put it away, but like
But to your
now
point, Arizona State lost their quarterback too.
yeah
They had a guy that looked like Bambi at quarterback. He looked just like lost
exactly
until he threw a touchdown to win the game.
exactly so. No, it's crazy that the run this Washington team may have been massively overrated, and then that now calls into question their win against Michigan State. It's like, well, how bad is Michigan State if this team crushed them, right? So
Yeah.
like I was originally on the Michael Michael Penix's hype train there for a little bit. Luckily enough, again, this is where it's good, right? Because you can be like, oh man, this quarterback looks so good, and then the model says, no, 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 they're really bad, and then the model was right. So this thing, I've actually like this week again, but like this is another test of it, right? This week again, Washington. I got this at 15 and a half. Arizona versus Washington. Arizona plus 15 and a half. I think it's down to 14 now. Not a lot
Mhm.
of difference between a 15 and a half and 14. But like again, double like two score favorites. Like I don't think this Washington team is nearly as good as we think it is.
Yeah, I think they're on offense. They're good, but I don't think they have the defense to really stay more than two scores ahead of Arizona. And sorry if I'm spoiling one of your picks. Um, I mean, Arizona can score.
Hmm.
Um, God, I'm curious. No. Later, we'll kind of maybe check the total on that game.
Yeah.
That's an interesting game. All right, next game: Mississippi State 4 to Arkansas 17. I'm wondering what happened to the whole wisdom of, yeah, well, you play Mike Leach, just drop 8 into coverage and you'll beat him, because that's all Jimmy Lake ever did at Washington, and it worked like a charm.
Yeah.
And I heard somebody say, well, he's running more. Well, you know what? He's not. Maybe he's running more successfully. Maybe he's got a different level of talent, but he's running at about the same rate. And I'm wondering if some SEC program might hire Jimmy Lake, since he definitely knows how to stop that. He's a good defensive coordinator. He coaches defensive backs, and he's an excellent recruiter too.
Hmm. So this is where this gets interesting, and we're starting. I see a couple people on Twitter pick up on this. So I actually am very high on Mississippi State. I'm actually very high on Will Rogers. I actually think he's a very good quarterback. I actually like my model has actually loved Mississippi State most of this season. The biggest surprise to this Mississippi State season is when they lost to LSU. No idea what happened in that game at all. That was just a crazy game. They were just out of that game from the start. But now this team's sitting at 5-1, 2-1 in SEC West play. Again, their only loss to an LSU team. Um, that LSU team is also 2-1 in SEC West, but I suspect some more losses for that LSU team are coming up.
Mm-hmm.
If Mississippi State keeps winning, and again they've got wins against Texas A&M and Arkansas, they've got Auburn, I believe, either this week or it's either Ole Miss or Mississippi State. I can't remember which one's playing Auburn this week, but like there is a non-zero chance that like Mississippi State and Alabama could be playing for the SEC West when they play in a couple
Mm-hmm.
weeks. And then also depending on what Ole Miss does, if Ole Miss were to lose to like we could be back to that like three-way tie-break thing in the SEC West here, where like you could have, I think some people on Twitter were calling out that the Egg Bowl could potentially determine who wins the SEC West,
Oh my
which would
God.
be crazy, like
Yeah.
just insane. But like this Will Rogers, he's pretty good. And like again, we got Alabama with Tennessee this week. Tennessee's got a real, especially if it's not Bryce Young. Tennessee's got a real shot
Man.
here. So
Yeah.
yeah,
If Alabama finds a way to lose that game, the SEC West could be an unexpected, sneaky free for all.
yeah,
No?
yeah.
Yeah.
There. And the questions about Georgia, right? Georgia hasn't looked that good. I mean, they crushed Auburn. I think was it this week or 2 weeks ago they
It
crushed
was it
Auburn.
was this week.
It was this week.
Yeah.
That was
Yeah.
sad. Because remember I said that like, oh, if Auburn loses by more than 30, they're just gonna fire Brian Harsin. They just didn't fire Brian Harsin, which I think is just because they can't really afford to just fire Brian Harsin.
Well,
They have to figure out a way to
that
get
and
rid of
there's
him.
nobody to fire him. They don't have an athletic director too.
Oh, that's why then. Okay, it's just like no one to fire him. They're like fire him. We can't. Why? There's just no one in
He's the
charge of him.
boss.
He's the boss himself. But no, yeah, like this SEC West could be very interesting down the stretch here. I'm
Yeah.
excited for this. Like I actually really like this Ole Miss team. If they hadn't lost to LSU, they'd probably be a top 10 team right now.
Yeah. No, definitely. Also in the SEC, Florida beats Missouri 24 to 17. I think I'm pretty glad I didn't see this one. Are we going to see a game in which Anthony Richardson maybe runs for more yards than he actually passes? He was 8 of 14 for 66 yards passing, and he ran for 45. Is it possible that we might have a game like that where he actually runs for more than he passes?
I think he did in the first game, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not sure. I'd have to double check, but it's definitely possible. I mean, this was bad. My model actually had Missouri favored in the game, and to be honest, if you look up Stats of War on Twitter, shout out to him. He's a great stats guy. He every week he basically does a projection. So he basically looks at based on EPA per play, like did did the team that won like how big was the difference in EPA per play between one team and the other team.
Hmm.
And technically, Missouri's EPA per play was actually bigger than Florida. So technically, he has the graphic. How bad did we get beat? So generally, the team that won is above the team that they got beat, but is on basically on his x axis. Missouri was actually below, which actually indicates that they actually had a higher EPA than Florida did. So like they could have. I mean, I took the 10.5 for Missouri in this game again. Never really. Well, not that 10.5 was never really in doubt. And like, yeah, this Florida team is not particularly good. They're against LSU this week. And again, this is Anthony Richardson, right? Like, how can you win SEC games when you're throwing for 66 yards and rushing for 45? Like, how can like if you put up just over 100, like what 110 yards, how are you winning SEC games? Like this isn't the Big Ten West. You can't do this here. You have to score points here.
They just did it though. They won a game. They
I
won that
know.
game.
Well, to be fair, it's Missouri. It's not really much of a
Yeah.
challenge, but like what are you going to do against Georgia, right? What are you going to do against?
Yeah.
They already lost to Tennessee, but like there's a lot of like it's this Florida team. Like I like the direction of this program, but like they need a different quarterback. I think Anthony Richardson is not the answer. I think we could kind of say that now.
I asked that question if he's going to be the starter in 2023, and I
I
don't
say
know.
I say
We'll
no.
see if they transfer portal in somebody because I don't know if he can recruit somebody in the I don't think he brought in a quarterback last year the way he was talking about his recruiting class. I just don't know. I doubt that he brought in a quarterback that he thinks could start. So watch the portal at Gainesville. UAB 41, Middle Tennessee 14. I bring this up because after beating Miami, Middle Tennessee has been outscored 86 to 44 by Conference USA teams. And guess what, guys? Conference USA is not like a sneaky good, feisty Group of Five conference.
Yeah, not. I mean, again, this is so embarrassing for every time like Middle Tennessee State loses. Like Miami should just feel a little worse. They should just move down people's power rankings, and like they really should. It's really bad. Like, and again, Miami lost to North Carolina. A game they probably actually should have maybe won that game, but whatever. It was North Carolina did pull out the win. But like man though, like I love Middle Tennessee, and like again, Middle Tennessee putting up like they put up like what 45 on Miami. They had no problem scoring against Miami at all. But then
No.
you go against the unstoppable defense that is UAB. Now we can't score more than 14 there. Their defense is too good. Like again, it's crazy. Mario Cristobal, no problem. Whoever's head coach of UAB now, that we can't score points against them. But like it's
Yep.
it's crazy.
Yep. More on him later. He's going to get a very, very generous portion of our time in part two. A couple of Sun Belt games. Texas State beats App State 36 to 24. Georgia State beats Georgia Southern. This is interesting because this brings to mind the Sun Belt teams that beat Texas A&M and Nebraska and Notre Dame are a combined 1-5 in Sun Belt play. That's amazing. Those are like I think they're like your bottom three in the Sun Belt East, which is the better of the two divisions too.
Hmm.
Um, not to keep on beating the point about how just underperforming some of these Power Five teams are, but that's just I don't know. That's interesting that just you can be bottom half of the Sun Belt and yet beat these name brand programs.
I think there's some pieces to that, right? I mean, obviously for Texas A&M, they very clearly overlooked App State. Nebraska probably overlooked Georgia. Like I think a lot of these times these teams overlook these Sun Belt teams that they're playing. Again, like they pay them basically $1.5 million to play these teams, and then they overlook them. And again, the thing is for a lot of these Sun Belt teams, right? Like for Marshall, you got to crack at Notre Dame, right? Georgia Southern, you get to take out Scott Frost. App State, you get to take out A&M, right? Like these are lifetime chances for some of these kids, right? These kids are gonna like these. They're gonna play their best game against these, and it's
Mm-hmm.
good on our models to figure out, hey, these teams should not be this high, and then we can take that and we could bet that spread and potentially throw a little money line because you never know on any given Saturday, I guess, right? So it's good on our models, but then again, it's crazy that these teams aren't actually also not that good. So then they just instantly lose to worse teams. So it's just kind of funny.
Yeah. Um, Boise State beats Fresno State 40 to 20. I've been kind of goofing on how bad Boise is, and then they fired their offensive coordinator. They brought in former head coach Dirk Cutter, and since then they're scoring 37 and a half a game. So, and they're in first place in the Mountain Division. So they might not be dead. They might actually be able to make some serious noise in the Mountain West.
Yeah, Mountain West just a mess this year. Um, we liked Air Force, not looking good.
No.
Um, but again, it's always hard when you think when you look at any of these kind of non-power, even the Power Five conferences, right? We like Minnesota, and Minnesota struggled, right? So it's always hard when you're looking at a lot of these conferences to figure out who the best teams are. But no, Boise State, yeah, they've really turned things around. Apparently, I guess the offensive coordinator was the problem, I guess, which is rare, but apparently not impossible. And I guess they
Yeah.
fixed it. So good on them.
Apparently. Yeah. Now, and the question is Cutter going to want to stay there long term as offensive coordinator? So maybe this is a one season thing. Who knows? Keep an eye on that, though. And then lastly, we've kind of just, this is almost like a running theme in the podcast. So we're not going to get too much into the gore of this. Illinois 9, Iowa 6.
Game of the week.
Yes. Very Big Ten West. I don't, I'm having a hard time coming to terms with Paul Christ being fired and Brian Ferentz still being employed. And I'll just keep it at that. Life's not fair.
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely crazy that this game is what's happening in Iowa is absolutely insane. I think we're going to talk about this more, but
Yeah.
this later. But just I actually saw a lot of this game, so I actually did. You watch some of this game or not?
Some because I had the under, and then it was, more towards the end, it was just going back to why it's so great to bet unders when there's no chance of it going over. You can just delight in a game like this. So yeah, I watched about the last 10 minutes of it.
Yeah, I watched the last bit of it into like the fourth quarter, like the fourth quarter and stuff, because I had Illinois minus 3.5, and then I like it was insane because like it shouldn't have been dead, but I knew it was dead. I'm like they're just gonna win by 3. There's no way anybody's scoring a touchdown out of this game, and like I was just watching plays and I couldn't bother just not laughing at some like I just like the interception. I just burst out like when they're like what 15 yards out from the goal line, throws a
Hmm.
pass. And I'm just like, I have to laugh. I'm just like, this is just, I can't even, like, sure, I'm going to lose a bet, but this is funny. Like, this is just comedy. Like, I can't, we're going to talk more about this game. I still have so many more thoughts about this game and this just horrible Iowa offense. So we'll talk about that more later. But just, man, Iowa, man, it's crazy.
Yeah, it's the absolute bane of an underbetter's existence is overtime. And this was 6-6 going pretty late. And even then I was thinking there's no way this would still hit the over. It just this could go to 5 overtimes and they'd still stay below the total of 36.
Yeah, that's gonna be the one where they kick field goals. Like still no one gets a
Yeah.
touchdown. They're like, okay, it's like start from the 25-yard line. Iowa goes back to the 30, kicks a field goal. Like that's the kind of overtime that it would be.
Yep. Yeah. Okay, market intelligence. So the opening line's telling us something. One stuck out to me. Ace Carolina only giving 4 to Memphis. That tells me the market really thinks a lot of Tulane because Eastern Carolina was not even close to Tulane. They lost like 21-6 or 21-9. It was not a close game at all. And the fact that they're giving 4 to a pretty good Memphis team whose defense stinks but whose offense is pretty robust, I think basically you've got to just again, we've been kind of bullish on Tulane for a few weeks here. Just give them another little boost in your non-numerical ratings in terms of what you think of the Green Wave.
Yeah, I yeah, I don't like this Memphis team is not particularly good. I mean this Memphis team blew a pretty big lead against
They did.
Houston. And like I remember, I was watching the game because I actually did have Houston. He had Houston in the points, and like I was like it was looking bad. But I'm like, it's not over. It's not
Mm,
over. And then like they start coming back. I'm like, no. There's like I'm like okay, fine. Like at one point they were within 3, and I'm like, this is fine now. I can lose in peace. This is okay. But then they won. And I'm like, this is crazy. How did they even do this? But yeah, no, like this East Carolina team's actually pretty good. My model actually likes this play a lot. I'll definitely play this as well.
And Memphis. Now that I've talked about it, I've kind of cited them. I think in talking about the top quarterbacks and the best wide receivers, they obviously have defensive problems. They might be that team, and not everything's about USC, but that's often my best context. USC in 2012, Lane Kiffin's last full season there was a team that could really get offense until it mattered, and you had to basically protect the lead. And I think you might see the same kind of dynamic here with this Memphis team. Yeah, they can get yards in some points, and then once they start to pucker, they can't get key first downs. Just like we saw, what we saw against Houston might be the best representation of what this Memphis offense, and in particular, is. All right, BBMI, brand-based market inertia, where I think the markets are slow to react to, based on specific brands. These are based on opening lines, so I'm sure these have moved since because usually when I point this out, there's been some movement to these initial opens. James Madison giving 9 at Georgia Southern. James Madison, I made the point last week, and, they're ranked now, so the word's kind of getting out. I think, okay, we can debate who's really number one. They're definitely a top group of 5 team. Georgia Southern, if you kind of look at their resume since they beat Nebraska, it's really what I expected preseason, and they're struggling with some of the basics here. So I just don't think that line is close to reality.
It's
San
12.
Jose.
It's
Oh, go
12
ahead.
now. It's 12 now.
Okay, that makes a lot more sense. San Jose State only giving 3 at Fresno State. Even if Jake Hayner is back, I've got San Jose State by far the strongest team in the Mountain West Conference. Has that line moved towards the Spartans as well?
Let me see here. I bet you anyway that game is super late. San Jose State minus 8.5. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that makes a lot more sense.
This Fresno State team is so weird, right? Like we were so hype on this Fresno State team, and we thought it was really good, and they are 1-4. And it
Yeah,
like when you say that, you're like Fresno State's 1-4. You're like what? But they played Oregon State so close, and then they lost, and they played USC somewhat close, and then they lost. Like it's just such an up and down year for them that like you hear they're 1-4, and you're like that's crazy. Like but they are, and it's been ever since that USC game. I mean, they lost to UConn. It's horrible. Then they lost to Boise. Yeah, like I don't envy the position this team's in. They got some easier games coming up. They got Hawaii, Nevada, San Diego State, but like yeah, San Jose State is actually a pretty good team. So that's definitely a
yeah.
problem for them.
I don't even know if this line has. I'm sure this has moved a little bit. I think, but Oklahoma giving 9, hosting Kansas. Um, Oklahoma's flat out bad. I don't know how they should be giving 9 to any Power 5. Maybe like the old Kansas of 3 years ago, sure. Not this Kansas team. Has this moved towards the Jayhawks?
So it did, but then it's moved back. I think there was like a fake injury report about Jalen Daniels, and then this line's moved back up to 9.
Oh,
So like
Daniels, yeah,
I never actually saw this at 9. I actually on my book this opened at 7 or 7.5. I can't remember, and I grabbed that. But yeah, I'm definitely going back in at 9. Like I completely agree with you. Still questions about whether or not Dylan Gabriel's playing in this game, which are questions. But like Kansas lost Jalen Daniels, then Jason Bean came in, who was horrendous last year, by the way. Like he was at like I remember this Kansas team last year because I had their season win total over, so I cared a lot about how this. Because like every week I'm like, how's this quarterback doing? Like, is he going to get us a win? Is he going to get us a second win? Right. So I actually cared a lot about this Kansas team last year. He was amazing. He like tore up like C.J. Stroud out there. Like it was crazy. Like, but yeah,
hmm
no, it was like yeah, no, I actually really think that this Kansas team could like I'll take any points when you can get like this Kansas team
yeah,
covered this number against TCU. TCU destroyed Oklahoma. Give me Kansas. Like I don't
yeah.
understand where this line is at all.
This is also an amazing like people watching slash fan watching game in terms of your Kansas fans are going to be in desperate. Please tell me that we're actually good mode, and Oklahoma fans are in desperate. Oh my God, are we really this bad? And the fact that it's at Oklahoma makes it that much more. These are the best venues to watch a game when a program is like kind of staring at the existential abyss about are we really bad? and they have a very losable home game, you get just that very odd noise that comes from the crowd, whether it's a good play or a bad play. The good plays are just like relief, and the bad plays are just, you don't hear it in any other kind of situation other than, oh my God. What, big picture, oh my God. So I
Yeah,
am definitely going to watch this one.
I mean, there's clearly something wrong with this Oklahoma team. And I think a lot of people are going to point to, oh, well, if Dylan Gabriel's back, that'll fix everything, which, again, that's not how this works. The thing of it is, like, you forget Dylan Gabriel, yes, he was knocked out against TCU. He was playing most of that game. He was bad for most of that. Like, it was not like he wasn't bad. They were still getting just destroyed when he was still in quarterback for most of that game, right? So,
Yeah.
like, just saying, oh, we're gonna put Dylan Gabriel in and we're gonna crush Kansas. Like, no, that's not how this works. You're still in deep trouble here. Like, this
Yeah.
is. Like, this is going to be a long rebuild here for this Oklahoma team. Like, we had talked about this. They lost a lot of pieces. They lost Caleb Williams. And I still think Dylan Gabriel is very good. Dylan Gabriel definitely does make this team. And I expect him to, if he does play, he's going to put up a lot of points because, again, Kansas's defense, not particularly good. But again, though, like Oklahoma's defense, also not particularly good, right? So I like a lot of points. But yeah, give me Kansas here. I'm not afraid to go with the Jayhawks again this week. We were off them last week. It was a good call. But yeah, I'm back on them this week.
Yeah, that's early window on ESPN2. I will grab early breakfast just so I'm home in time to watch most of that game.
Yes.
All right, my top QB pluses. Ones that stand out to me. Number 10 is Todd Centeio, James Madison. He was at Colorado State last year. Um,
They need him this year.
yeah, yeah. Well, I think they're a little longer term build, but the fact that now they have a top 10 quarterback in addition to that awesome defense, Dukes are something and going places. Number 11, Dorian Thompson Robinson of UCLA. Really good season from him. He's never really been that high on any of these lists until more the end of last year, and he's just taken it to another gear. Um, really cementing why I have UCLA as the top team in the Pac-12, at least for now. And the number 12, Dylan Hopkins of UAB. I had him really highly rated coming into the season. He had a crappy start, and he's really recovered since. When we talked about Conference USA in the preseason, I mentioned that UAB was the most talented team. I just didn't like them. I bet against them because of the change in head coaching, and they had a little bit of a hiccup there, but they seem to have recovered a little bit, notwithstanding the loss to Rice. But at least on offense, they've got it together, and he's back to what he was last year, which is a good sign for them. The bum list, the other side at the worst quarterbacks. Speaking of which, I owe my buddy Hambone a call. He sent me a text saying the gambling gods looked very kind to me last night, and he sent this on Sunday morning, and I forgot to call him, so I can't wait to see what that happened to him. Anyways, the bum list. Two names that stick out here. Seventh on the bum list is Ethan Hampton of Northern Illinois. Really just leading the regression from that crazy season they had last year where they won every close game. I think they're 1-5 now, and they're finding all kinds of ways to lose. And he's doing his part. He threw 4 interceptions last week. And then just ahead of him, Zach Wilkie of Southern Miss. Southern Miss has had quarterback problems. Last year they had, I think, 7 guys throw a pass at some point of this last season. The good news is they've settled on one guy. The bad news is it's him, and this is what he's doing. So Southern Miss did not pose any kind of damage or of a threat to Troy. I think that was one of those games that both of our models like last week, Troy over Southern Miss, and I think that Southern Miss is going to be a pretty solid fade for the rest of this season because they still have serious quarterback issues. A couple wide receivers that stand out to me in my top receivers metric. Number 2, it's just unfair to say. Emeka Egbuka from Ohio State. He's number 2 in the nation, and he's not even the best receiver on his own team. When Smith and Jigma gets back, I mean, we're going to see light bend when it comes to the kind of numbers that Ohio State's offense puts up. It's going to be crazy. And then number 10, Rome Odunze from Washington. I think we're going to see, we talked about this when we were talking about our Arizona State. I think Washington's got some problems on defense. I think their offense is okay. So when I see, good quarterback like Penix, and then, you get an explosive receiver like this guy, Washington, I think, is going to be looking at some high scoring games the rest of the season.
Hmm.
All right, USC update. So 30-14 win hosting Washington State. Not too far off the line that I made of 12.5 in the preseason USC preview pod. Caleb Williams is holding steady now. He's at 16th in QB plus. The offense is regressing a little bit. Probably some of that is just a regression to the mean from some of those crazy early season performances against Stanford and Rice. 18th overall in offense. When we take away the adjustment for strength of opponent, they're eighth. The pass blocking is a concern. If you're watching them, Williams is under pressure a lot. Now, good thing for him, he deals with it much, much better than when he's, thrown coverages that he's not comfortable with. But if they lose Williams, it's not just they're losing his skill. His backup does not have the same ability, and things could go super, super south. I'm not trying to jinx it, but man, he's getting them out of a lot of tricky situations with his feet. Jordan Addison, 17th in wide receiver ratings. Mario Williams showed explosive capabilities. He had over 20 per catch this week, and he can. I think he's stepping into a bigger role since Addison was hurt last week. I don't know if Addison was 100% this last week, but I think Williams will be looking at a bigger role going forward. The defense is 29th overall in FBS per my model. I have them at a plus 4.5, which is pretty good. Overall, I have the team second, like I said, in the Pac-12 behind UCLA. This week, they're getting, is it still 3 at Utah?
I've seen 3.5. I grabbed 3 early. I think it's 3.5 now. Yeah, I'm seeing 3.5s.
Okay. I made it 8.5 in the preseason pod. So I think that's a function of Utah just not being as awesome on offense. And, part of that's their tight end Keith. He's been out, and he was just really their biggest guy on offense. My model actually has this even. USC is a little bit better on both sides of the ball, but they've played in easier venues. So once you adjust for that, it's pretty much they're the same team. The model has this game Utah winning 32-30, which is pretty much in line with the point spread. I don't know what you have a total on this one.
Um,
I'm just curious
60,
if that.
65, 65.
Okay, yeah. So my model's pretty close to that too. So we'll see how that plays out.
I actually have. What do I have? I know I have this close, but I actually have USC favored. Um, I have. What do I have? I actually, yeah, I have Utah. I have USC -3.
Wow.
So yeah, I mean close, right? I mean, but I actually do like USC in this. Or at least my model does. At least I don't. But yeah, I'm taking the Trojans. I this USC team is just fun. Like honestly, and this Utah team they've had like they lost to a Florida team that looks worse every week, and they did lose to UCLA. Actually, mostly kind of got blown out by UCLA. Actually, that game wasn't
Yeah.
as close as as the scoreline suggests. Yeah, so give me the Trojans. Like, I mean, they're a public dog, and that is a little scary. But sometimes the public, like again, there's a lot of public dogs this week, and maybe we'll talk a bit more about that later. There's got a lot of news attraction on Twitter. People are like, "Oh, there are all these public dogs, and public dogs have fleas." But like, if the public's betting like 6 specific dogs, probably at least, like I don't think they're gonna go 0 for 6. I think USC is probably the one that has the best chance of winning, versus some of the other ones that they're talking about. So
Mm-hmm. Yep. All right. On my future bets, the one I like the best right now, that Tennessee over 8 wins. We still have some ground to cover, but that's looking very good. They're looking good and improving too each week. Club hot seat, arrivals and departures. Just one. Andy Avalos with the big move of replacing his offensive coordinator. He settled his tab in club hot seat and got a car service ride home. So good for him. He'll live to fight another day.
yeah,
Do you have a Narduzzi?
I mean we kind of talked about this already, but I'm giving it to the head coach of Georgia Tech. whoever that guy is. I'm giving it to that guy. I mean, just amazing. Like you beat Pitt as a 20 something point dog, then you beat a Duke team that I really like. Like, how did you turn this around? Now, actually, if you look at it online, they've been running the ball a lot more. Like, they've basically said, okay, Jeff Sims, don't throw the ball anymore, just hand it off, and then we're going to win the game that way. So they're kind of going back to. I'm not sure if it's a full triple option or more just run the ball, but like, yeah, I mean, it's getting back to strength. And again, part of this, like, part of becoming a good football coach is like, or taking over and becoming a good football coach is like, hey, look, our guy can't throw the ball, so what can we do? We can run the ball. So let's just do that a lot. And maybe good things will happen. And somehow they beat Pitt and Duke. So yeah, like good on that guy.
Yeah, Brett Key. I don't know how it's happened, but he's making it happen. Um, in the spirit of making a Narduzzi's a olive branch, I'll give mine to Chip Kelly because UCLA is good, and they just, like we said, they dominated Utah. That wasn't even close.
Yeah,
That game was never in doubt. You never thought, after maybe the first quarter that Utah was really going to win that game.
this is one of the reasons why I'm more confident about UCLA, USC over Utah this week. But then also Utah versus UCLA. Now I'm not. Is it at USC or is it at UCLA?
USC versus UCLA.
Or does that really
It's
matter?
it's at the Rose Bowl. You know what? They'll probably have some fans if they have one or two losses at that, or zero at that point.
But like you've got to get a.
Having said that, actually, there's a lot of pent up demand in among USC fans because they just had nothing to cheer about for a long time in person.
Haven't been able to go to the Rose Bowl in a while either. So
Yeah, yeah.
well,
So
not like
they,
in a good position. So I don't know the geography. Like you've got to be like the USC fans have got to be pretty close to the Rose Bowl, right?
um, yeah. Depending on, I'm not saying it's a good or bad thing, but USC fans are everywhere.
That's
Um,
true. No, that is
it,
true. But
it's not like they're on one side of town, and there's a lot of them in that part of the San Gabriel Valley too.
okay, well, it's not a bad. Like there will be USC fans there.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
So like
yeah. So
the thing of it is, if you're gonna have a game to decide the Pac-12 is are they their divisions this year, right? Or
they're not.
they're not
They're
divisions this
not.
year. Okay. If you're
This
gonna
could be,
have
like we said, like the Sunflower Showdown. Maybe this could be a preview
Yeah, if this
of.
is going to be the preview or basically the game that decides, well, this will basically be the person. This will be the team who locks in their bid to the Pac-12 championship game, right? If this is basically your first chance to clinch the bid, right? Then like there should be fans there, right? You don't want to play in front of like a three quarters empty Rose Bowl. At least have fans there, right?
Oh, I think it'll be pretty full no matter what.
Yeah,
It's just the proportion. How is that split?
yeah. I honestly think the three teams that could make the Pac-12 championship are USC, UCLA, and Oregon.
Yep, I agree.
Oregon, like ever since getting absolutely obliterated by Georgia, man, it's just crazy looking team there. They've been really surprising me. They seem to have unlocked Dan Lemming seemed to unlock something in Bo Nix there. So, um,
I'm really looking forward to when they play Washington because you've
yeah,
got two high scoring offenses and two defenses that kind of accommodate high scoring offenses. I think you'd maybe characterize it as.
yeah, they play UCLA next week, so that's going to be
They
a
do.
good game.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And
That'll be
then
interesting.
yeah, so yeah, sounds good. All right, one more
All
thing
right. And
before
then,
part two. Yeah,
yep, my G5 New Year's Bowl bid rankings. So for some context, now that I've got enough data points, I'm comfortable with my power rankings of each conference. So just for context, from top to bottom, within the conferences themselves, number one is the Sun Belt. Number two is the American. Three is Conference USA. Four is the Mountain West, and five is the MAC. Just for some context, so we just don't just take whatever team, regardless of which conference they're in. So, with that in mind, here's my top five. I got to say, I'm just sad that I can't include James Madison again. Really
yeah,
stupid rule. They definitely deserve some consideration here. So, number five, I have San Jose State. They need things to fall the right way, but they're by far the best team in the Mountain West, and they only have one loss. And since it was on the road by one score to Auburn, I think if they run the table here, um, I think there's a path and an argument for them. They need some things to happen, and that gets me to my number 4 and 3 teams, which are 4 is Cincinnati and 3 is Tulane. there's some great games coming up in the American between just there's almost like a round robin between Cincinnati, Tulane, SMU, UCF, and Memphis, who can at least can score a lot and make you uncomfortable. Just if you're not on top of your game. I actually think I have what's interesting. My model has these teams basically even, Cincinnati and Tulane. I I believe in Tulane a little more. I think their numbers are being dragged down a little bit when they lost their quarterback. I think if you just kind of normalize that for when they're at full strength, Tulane's probably a bit better than Cincinnati. And it just seems like I hate this kind of intangible stuff. It just seems like the season's kind of falling Tulane's way. Notwithstanding that stupid loss to Southern Miss. But I think Tulane can do it. And they're consistent too. Aside from that one dumb loss, their defense shows up every time, and their defense is definitely legit. Um, Number two, I have Coastal Carolina because they are undefeated in the best conference in the toughest division. And if they can kind of run the table and beat an undefeated JMU and then win the conference, they've got it. I think it's going to be hard to argue with them. The other side of that, who I have number one, is my Jaguars of South Alabama, because it's just the other side of that story. If Coastal Carolina goes undefeated and they beat an otherwise undefeated James Madison, and then South Alabama stays with only one loss, beats an then undefeated Coastal Carolina, and South Alabama's only loss is a one-score game at UCLA, who will be in the top 10 probably still at that point, if not higher, who won on a last-second field goal. Sneakily, I don't even know if South Alabama's getting votes, but I think I can make the best case for them right now since they're in the best conference. And I know they're not ranked, but I think there's a big difference, as we've seen, between the committee and the AP and coaching poll voters. So
Mm-hmm.
keep an eye on my Jaguars.
Yeah, for sure. All right, so that is part one. We will see you guys in part two when we talk about our picks for the week.